Greetings, and thank you for joining our program today, Evolving Workscape. Today's program is part of the Raymond James monthly webinar series, and our topic today is unique. Typically, we talk about things specifically related to what we affectionately call retirement plans, whether it's 401ks, 403bs, and pensions. Today, we are taking a step back and looking at the workplace, your employees, what they're looking for from a much broader lens. I do want to spend a minute on some housekeeping items, then we'll do some introductions and give you a sense of what you can expect over the course of the next hour. As you know, by participating today in the program, you will earn 1 hour of SHRM PDC credits. So after the program, you're going to get 2 emails. The first is going to be from me with a copy of the slides. So if there's information here that you want to capture, don't feel like you need to take copious notes. What I want you to do today is really to listen, to take it in, and think about 1 or 2 actionable ideas that you can bring back to your organization. You're then going to get another email that has a certificate of completion from the Hartford. So you might be looking at this screen and saying, wow, there's a lot of logos here. So let me just talk you through that for a minute. My name is Kristen Kolish. I am a retirement plan advisor at Raymond James, and I have the honor of being joined by Tom Barrett, who is a managing director of applied insights at the Hartford Funds. Now, the Hartford is a partner of Raymond James and has collaborated with MIT Age Labs on some really interesting research as it relates to what the future looks like. I mean, it's such a broad topic, but in a world where the longevity economy is on the New York Times bestseller list, you have to think that there are different ways that we need to be viewing the world on a go-forward basis. You also see SHRM's logo, and SHRM's logo partnered with Raymond James's logo. So if you are not aware, SHRM 401k Solutions by Raymond James is a collaboration between the 2 organizations to bring to members and also non-members advisory services to help you improve your retirement plan offering. And through that prism, and as a member, you actually have access to complimentary retirement plan benchmarking. So those are good follow-ups for after this call if you're interested in pursuing. But Tom, if you could just forward a couple slides. I do want to, I gave some thought as to, when we make introductions and someone says, well, what do you do, right? Well, what's my title? Retirement plan advisor. Okay, that doesn't mean anything. If I describe what do I do today, I help workers make meaningful progress on their personal financial plans. And how do I do that? I do that by working with employers to build meaningful benefits programs. Contrast that, let's say, with what I would have described my role as 20 years ago when I was first coming into the industry. I would have said, I work with plan sponsors to manage their fiduciary responsibilities, and I educate participants about retirement planning. Now, that's still true. I still do those things, but the way I communicate what I'm delivering is, I believe, a kind of change in mindset. Your employees don't want to hear about the features of certain things. They want to hear about what's the benefit to them. And that's the mindset through which I hope that we will reflect on today's research that Tom's going to be sharing with us and some great takeaways. Because ultimately, we are in a world where we're becoming accustomed to, we are almost expected to be communicated with individually. I open my phone, I go to Netflix, I open Amazon. It's almost like they know what I want to see or what I want to buy. And I think the same holds true for benefits. It holds true for financial planning, and an acknowledgement that the traditional path of a worker is probably not what we're going to see on a go-forward basis, at least at the masses. We're going to see more customization. So ultimately, it's less about like, I need to retire, and more about having the freedom to live how you want. And I think about that through the lens of financial independence. Financial wellness is a topic that is, to me, in some ways overdone. I'm sick of the word wellness. I don't know about you from an HR perspective. Of course, we all want to be well, but the reason why I get frustrated with it is because I feel like it's getting sold as a product, right? Like I'm going to buy a financial wellness package. And if you think about that as, okay, check a box, I'm offering my employees financial wellness, that's not going to lead to financial wellness. But just elevating the conversation within your organization of how important it is to be giving your employees the tools that they need to feel successful. And that's different than giving them a paycheck, right? And some nuances here. And I can appreciate that in many ways, I think we're going to be preaching to the choir when it comes to a lot of these topics. And your challenge is how do you get the attention of all your colleagues, maybe outside of the HR department, to bring this back to some policies and really planning for your organization? Because ultimately, a workforce that has less stressors is going to be more productive. So it's not about being altruistic. It's about good business. And a lot of companies are kind of seeing it that way. So with that, I'd love to turn it over to Tom, who's going to walk us through this very interesting and engaging topic.
I should probably unmute. All right. Thanks, Kristen. Appreciate
Perfect.
it so much. And thanks everyone for joining us this afternoon. Greatly appreciate it. You just heard my name's Tom Barrett, Managing Director with Hartford Funds. I typically am up in the air. I'm usually in 3 or 4 different cities a week all across the country, sharing research and insight from a number of unique partnerships, but particularly of note and the focus today, our relationship with the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and their Age Lab program. They're some of the foremost experts in aging and longevity planning in our country today. But you're probably noticing I am at home. I'm beaming to you outside of my bunker here in Philadelphia, where I live. So I'm happy I get an opportunity to connect with people so very far away, thanks to this type of technology. And certainly this will come up as a theme again, I promise you. But let me introduce you to the founder and director of the MIT Age Lab. His name is Dr. Joe Coughlin. He's got this great line. He says, now that we've achieved what humankind's tried to achieve really since we've been able to walk, which is living longer, we don't necessarily know what to do with all of that additional time. And that will certainly be a theme that I will be discussing today, is ways of helping people with productivity of that time. But before I jump into the discussion, I do want to give you a little bit of a backdrop as to who the folks are that's fueling the research and today's topic. The MIT Age Lab was founded back in 1999. It's housed in MIT's School of Engineering, and they're sharing resources from all over campus. They're working with Sloan School of Business, departments of architecture and design, psychologists, sociologists. If there's an ologist at the end of the name, probably on this team. And they're really all focused on one objective. It's the study of change. So changes in demographics or changes in lifestyle trends, technologies. How is that shaping the way all of us are making consumer-facing decisions? It's the goal of their research. And I'll give you all just an example to bring to life how they're doing their research in a unique and interesting way. On the screen in front of you, you're seeing these two folks. They're wearing this goofy looking jumpsuit. That jumpsuit has a name. Its name is Agnes. MIT, they love acronyms, so that actually stands for something. It stands for Age, Gain, Now, Empathy System. And hopefully you're catching that key word in there, which is empathy. It's critically important to understand how it is that I feel. So the way this suit works is you can kind of make out there's these yellow straps, there's weights in the arms and the legs, you can barely move your limbs. They put on this neck brace, all of a sudden you can't rotate your head. They have these weighted gloves that will simulate arthritis. And I don't know if this sounds fun to anyone yet, if I have any volunteers, but they have these these eye goggles that simulate a number of degenerative eye conditions. And I can probably take anyone that's on the line with us today, put you in the Agnes suit, dial it up, make you feel like you're 85, 90, 95, or 100 years old. And I say probably, I only hesitate because I learned from experience. It's a true story. I was in Florida at an assisted living facility mentioning the suit. And a woman in the audience raised her hand. She volunteered. She said, sure, I'd be 95. And she was 103. And unfortunately, we can't take the suit in reverse, but we can certainly simulate aging. Let me give you quickly an example of how they applied this. If you have not been in a CVS pharmacy in the last several years, I'm here to tell you there's been some significant design changes. And this was a result of a collaborative study with the MIT Age Lab. The leadership team at CVS concluded they needed to be more accommodative to what they perceived was an aging consumer base. They partnered with MIT. And one of the tools and techniques they used was putting the CVS leadership team in the Agnes suit, had them go shop at their own pharmacy. They found this to be a very frustrating experience. So now, everyone on the line will have kind of insider knowledge as to why they made the design changes they did. If you recall in the past, you'd enter the stores immediately, you were greeted by aisles. They touched both sides of the walls all the way to the back, basically hitting the ceiling. They've broken all of this down into a series of islands. It's much easier to navigate the store. I'm not reaching up on my tippy toes anymore. They've significantly reduced the height of the shelves. I'm actually not bending down as far. They've raised the lower shelves, reimagining where everything is placed throughout the store. Even the lighting at a CVS pharmacy has changed as a result of this collaborative study. Now, MIT also does a lot of research into the changing longevity demographics and how they'll impact all sorts of areas, and particularly as we're focusing today. The future of the workplace is going to be heavily impacted by the fact that we're all living longer. So in today's discussion, I'm going to just talk about what we're referring to as disruptive demographics, or really trends we're seeing in demographics, not only in our country, but particularly within the workplace, talking about how we're working and how generations in one office are really changing the way we're working. And then, of course, things like the pandemic, and there are certain catalysts that are driving these changes. And then finally, what MIT refers to as their new social contract for how employers and employees should be working in tandem together, and really driving to how employee expectations have so greatly changed. And so jumping into disruptive demographics for a moment, just talking about the fact that America is certainly graying. And as it stands right now, we are already one of the quarter oldest countries, we're in the top 20% oldest countries in the world. And we're only continuing to get older. In fact, it is expected by the year 2030 there will be, 5 adults for every 1 child. I should have known that statistic a little better, but more importantly, by the year 2034, adults will have outnumbered children for the first time in the history of the United States. One bit I can certainly give you on this is the data suggests right now, if there's a couple in our country age 65, the probability that at least one will live well into their 90s right now is a 45% probability. It's merely a coin flip. And the issue here is not only the fact that we are continuing to get older, but as I mentioned, the youth population continues to shrink. And that is going to create some interesting dynamics in terms of dependency ratios, because as it stands right now, the United States is really a youth dependent population, but that is going to shift in the coming years to be more of an elderly dependent population. And our workforce is going to be somewhere stuck in between, possibly being primary caregivers for both. Now, if we were to break down just what's going on in terms of percent of the labor force as it stands today, one thing I'll note is that this information was captured from 2019, the last cut of data here. And I know I can tell you this has significantly changed. I'll show you in a couple of slides. A significant percentage of baby boomers did retire in 2020 and beyond, which has changed this dynamic, but still represent around 20% of the overall workforce. But as it stands right now, millennials have officially taken over as the largest cohort currently working. And it's going to lead me to this little bit of research that MIT does, a foundation for our discussion today. MIT tells us that all of us are going to live through 4 distinct phases of 8,000 days apiece. And if you were to not want to break out your calculator right now, I'll spare you. 8,000 days broken down is around 22 years apiece. And so they say there'll be these distinct segments. So from the time we're born to the time we graduate college or university, enter service in the military, what have you, probably around 22 years. It's this learning phase, this growing phase where everything from our job responsibilities, our salaries, hopefully our maturity is growing. It takes us to this first midlife crisis. And I mentioned first, because if we're living as long as I just projected, it's possible we might experience multiple midlife crises in our lifetime. But we reach this maturing phase. You're probably reconnecting with your spouse the first time significant in the last 20 years. Just the volume, the velocity, the complexity at which life has been coming at us. It's greater than ever before. A lot of big questions get asked during this phase. But finally, there's this fourth phase, this exploring phase. Now, Dr. Joe Coughlin puts this very bluntly. He suggests that this is typically from the time you retire to the time you expire, can be around 22 years. Now, history has suggested that age 65 is kind of that magical finish line when we will retire and we'll move on, to a life of leisure. However, what I will tell you is that that dynamic has shifted significantly. What Dr. Joe Coughlin is suggesting now is that the beginning of this exploring phase is usually earmarked by the continuance of work. Because as he puts it, there's this honeymoon phase we all go through where we are no longer working and we have all of this additional time. We have this euphoric feeling about it. And that lasts around 6 to 12 months before we get the itch that we want to be doing something more productive with that time. So all of you as HR professionals might be having to manage with people thinking about this transition into this phase of life and some type of form of work that might look a little different than what they've been doing the last 20 or 30 years. And now, in terms of what the future of the workplace looks like, I'm here to tell you we are going to continue to be managing with a much older workforce. In fact, as we can see here, by the year 2030, it's anticipated that the fastest growing segment of the workforce population is actually going to be those over the age of 75. Which does make a lot of sense because there was some independent Pew research that was done just a few years ago that found that nearly 70% of baby boomers said that they intend to continue to work after the age of 65, and that every baby boomer will have officially reached the age of 65 by the year 2030. Now, in terms of why they want to continue to work, very few responded that it was a matter of economics, that I needed more money to make ends meet. It was kind of like I was mentioning to you before during that honeymoon phase. We get that itch that we want to have a place to go, people to see, something to do. It's very important. In fact, beyond that, as I'll share a little further down some more about this, but I've been closely working with a neuroscientist talking about brain health as we age. And one of the biggest concerns, he says, really an epidemic that could be facing Americans that could be worse than smoking. It's loneliness due to the fact that we exit the workplace and then don't think about what's next. This is a little bit of a frightening statistic, folks, but when we are working full time, when we're working 40 hours or more a week, we're consuming on average around 80 minutes of television a day. The average retiree over the age of 65, no longer working in any capacity, is consuming somewhere around 290 minutes of television a day. And that's why you're going to probably run into a lot more people that say, you know what, I'm not ready for what's next. I still have a lot more to give, a lot more energy, and I certainly have the time. And so we'll continue to see a robust group of capable workers that are just wanting to be active and involved at this stage of their careers.
What I think is
And then,
interesting, Tom,
yeah, go ahead.
is that we think about Social Security today as a Social Security income system. But when it was born, it was an insurance policy. It was an insurance policy for longevity, right? That's why Social Security existed, was just in case someone lived longer than the average life expectancy. And it's morphed into this idea that it's going to help us retire, and it's going to help us retire for decades. So the underlying message here is that there needs to be a great deal of thought and planning before someone is kind of get to that, quote unquote, magical age. So as you think about your workforce, Tom threw up the graph about what the average demographics are, millennials, Gen X, baby boomers. It's important, and I know you do as HR professionals, but I wonder if your senior executives, if your C-suite understand who are their workers, who are their employees, and what are the things that are important to them.
That's perfect. That's a great point around Social Security that I might help arm some folks on the line today with when you're talking to somebody about kind of that next phase. The Social Security Administration tells us if we want to maintain our standard of living when we're no longer working in any capacity, we need to be able to supplement at least 75% of the income we earned when we worked full time through our retirement income resources. And I'll just paint a picture for everyone. Last year, the average Social Security recipient, only 20 to 25% of their total retirement income came from their Social Security check. The majority of the onus for retirement is going to be on us. It's going to be through the 401k plans, the individual investments, the IRAs and such. And what I have noticed is that a lot of people, and MIT has stated this as well, one of the biggest concerns they see is that we all greatly underestimate our own life expectancy. It can be very hard to visualize that 20 or 30 years of healthy aging, but understanding how much we will need to be comfortable through there, that is something that they'll oftentimes turn to us at least for some advice on. So hopefully that can be helpful. Now, on top of that, just thinking about these additional advantages, I mentioned this work I've been doing with a neuroscientist, and it's been fascinating. Just the fact that there are so many little things we can do to significantly reduce the risks of onset dementia and Alzheimer's. Some of get this, just having a positive outlook on aging can reduce our risk of onset dementia by nearly 40%. And the reason for that is if we have a positive outlook on aging, we're oftentimes going to be doing the activities and engagements that keep us youthful, energetic, keep our brains healthy and clean. And if we think about what the workplace provides, it provides all of those aspects that are so helpful to a healthy brain. Social connection so important for making new brain cells in the memory center of our brain, constantly learning new information, having that sense of purpose and structure. It can really do a lot for somebody. So there is certainly that benefit. And then just in terms of the fact that there's going to be lots of opportunity for folks that are looking for work, because there is an unprecedented labor shortage going on in our country right now, particularly with skilled labor. But as we're seeing with the aging of America, that guarantees that there's going to be a continuing supply of jobs in the field of healthcare. Yet there's already a significant shortfall in terms of nursing and qualified doctors. Trucking is a really interesting one, because all of us love to get our Amazon packages delivered every day, but none of us want to get a career driving. As it stands in 2024, get this, there is a shortfall this year of 80,000 drivers, truck drivers. That number is expected to balloon to 162,000 by the year 2030. It's officially hit cultural lexicon when something's on South Park. But there was a recent episode that kind of made light of the fact that a geologist with a PhD had broken his oven and he couldn't fix the door. And the contractor that came to the house to fix it in his $100,000 car, because he makes the most money in town, no one else can do the work. So some of these types of opportunities are certainly going to exist for the people that continue to hold that knowledge base. And then when you're looking at this data, I did just look this up this morning, Kristen, because I know that these are a little outdated. We've seen certainly a decrease in job openings as it stands through February of 2024. There were 8.8 million job openings. There were 5.6 million unemployed. At the end of the day, the bottom line is this: there are still a lot of opportunities for people that are seeking positions. It's not a time where there's a lack of choice. So people are able to be a little bit more discerning about where they choose to work. As a result of that, we need to be a little bit more open to being competitive and to differentiate ourselves from what some of the other offerings are out there for these folks. And in terms of the brain drain, I'm sure some folks have heard of this term before. You're probably experiencing it within your workforce. But as the baby boomer population continues to exit the workforce, they're taking with them their expertise, experience. They're taking with them their culture carrying ability. And oftentimes that is not being replaced, and there seems to be a vacuum. as a result of this. And so as you're seeing here, in terms of passing the torch, 84% believe it's a big loss when an older employee retires without passing along the knowledge to others. And I promised you I'd show it to you. The baby boomer brain drain is certainly in effect right now, because as we saw that data showing us 25% of the workforce were boomers in 2019. Well, as a result of the pandemic, with some other catalysts, but primarily the pandemic, we saw a record 29 million boomers retiring in 2020. But what is really fascinating here is that how few of them had actually passed on a proper succession plan. Even though many of them were willing to do so, very few employers actually encourage participation in any of these particular areas to be better prepared. And I think this is important because I'm probably preaching the choir a little bit, you all being HR professionals, but you all know that there is a tangible cost, financial cost to replacing an employee. But then there's that intangible cost as well, because seasoned employees, they have that knowledge about your products, the processes, the strategies, the customer needs, and all of these things can be imperative to your business success. And then when they leave, they take all that knowledge with them. And on top of that, say there's a staff shortage, for instance, who are you often turning to? It's going to be that most seasoned member of your team. It seems to make that logical choice. So certainly we know that it can be hard in terms of just finding that next ideal candidate and then training them. And sometimes that first or second candidate doesn't work. There was a study that was conducted just recently. Helios HR had said that a top performer, when they leave an organization, the cost of replacing them could cost somewhere over 200% of the original salary. And so finding ways to try to at least build a process around succession planning, mentorship, or even a way to extend these people's employment can be beneficial to the bottom line. And this is where I think about a process for a moment, Kristen, because I know all of you HR reps, me, everyone in my field, every year there's somebody kind of like me. They get on a stage, they're talking about the latest and greatest practice management thing, what's going to change your business, all these different ideas. And then, I go back, and I know others go back, and they implement none of it. And the reason I think is pretty simple. There is a great practice management expert. His name is Matt Oxley. And he says, when it comes to success, the power of positive thinking is a myth. In fact, success is really a simple equation. It is tying a simple and repeatable process to an ambitious goal. And so when it comes to something like a knowledge transfer plan, I look at this as, what is getting in the way of us thinking about this? It might be that we're overcomplicating it. It's really start with just a simple process and build on it from there. But as you can see here, almost a little more than half of boomers have actually shared their all or less of their knowledge around what their workplace responsibilities are. And it's very easy for you to start. I think this is the template you would use just to kick things off. Having people take a couple of minutes to sit down and respond to the questions that are on the screen is a great place to start. And moving on from that, just talking about where we're going to be finding opportunities for people to employ in terms of the demographics. This one, we've been seeing the trend coming here for a couple of decades. I don't think I need to spend a lot of time explaining that there are more women in the workplace than ever before. In fact, officially, more than half of women in the United States are currently employed.
And actually,
But
just to piggyback on that,
there
Tom,
is oh, sorry. Sure.
I was just going to say, last month, our topic of interest was the webinar I hosted was a financial wellness workshop for women. And that, like a lot of the things that we spoke about in March, we're understanding how that workforce might have different needs than, and again, we're speaking in generalities, but understanding that flexibility may be important, and especially as they get older, perhaps, and this is men and women, but as part of the sandwich generation, where just appreciating that what goes on in their world between the hours of 9 to 5, if that's their structure, between the hours of 5 to 9, stuff is going on when they're at work, and
Right.
having an appreciation of that, and helping them to feel successful is going to help them want to stay on longer. Right? If they
Yeah.
feel like you don't have an appreciation of what's going on outside of work, then that's where we see women fall out of the workforce.
And we'll talk about personalized benefits and how it can be impactful for women in a minute, but that's a great point. And you made me think of a couple of things. One is MIT has stated that when it comes to higher education, women are now out earning men in every category of a bachelor degree. And in terms of advanced degrees, they're out earning men in all but one, which is engineering. But MIT anticipates women to be out earning men in engineering degrees in the near future. So you are absolutely right about that. But it doesn't change the fact that this little bit of information exists, which is the average caregiver in our country today is female, is age 46 to 52, is working full time, is the oldest daughter in the household. And I'm not here to say that's right by any means. It's just the way that we perceive it to be. We have one on the screen in front of us. And to your point, Chris, and what we have found is this, that not only are that caregiver is spending a lot out of pocket on caring for their loved ones, which, creates additional challenges. But if they get the call to take full-time care of their loved ones, oftentimes they will heed that call, and it just creates a lot of challenges. So maybe their benefit package might look a little different because they could be caring for that loved one. They might not be as interested in one compensation plan or another, depending on the circumstance. Anywho, the problem is when we think about, remember I mentioned we're going to be moving towards that elderly dependent population. We do have the lowest birth rate in the history of our country. You mentioned Social Security, Chris, and back in 1935 when the program was enacted, there were 45 active U.S. workers for every one recipient. Today there are 3, and certainly this is playing into that shift. But as a result, really, when we think about that traditional career cycle that started with that education, getting into the workforce, and hitting different milestones, with there being that distinct finish line, typically the checkered flag at age 65, is really not what MIT looks at as the future of work. They really think the new career cycle has not a career ladder, but rather a career lattice, where there will be a certain time when we will be willing to make a transition, oftentimes from dollars and cents in terms of salaries and earnings, to flexibility of time and personalization of benefits. And given the fact that demographics are shifting so much, we are seeing that how we are working is changing quite a bit. I don't know if anyone is rolling their eyes when they're seeing new perspectives on remote work, and I know not everyone has this capability, but I am here to tell you that it really has proven to be a great experiment for many employers. The benefits we can see on the screen, like we mentioned, having that work-life balance is certainly important, particularly if we're caring for many people. But something I think is worth noting that is advantageous is the money it can save, and not just to you, but also to the employees themselves, just in terms of commuting, the gas, the food, all these various expenses. They was on average saving around $4,000 to have somebody work remote. I'll just give a personal story because my wife was working in an office full time in 2019. The pandemic hit. They all started working remotely. And then they said, listen, we're going to start bringing you back 2 days a week, and then 3. She was uncomfortable with that. She wanted to continue to work remotely. She really did accelerate at doing it. She was better at and more focused, just something she liked. And she warned her employer that if she wasn't able to work remotely, she would find an alternative workplace, and she did. Not only did she go and seek a different employer that offers her 100% remote work, turns out she's making more money as a result of it. This is something she never would have sought out had her employer been a little bit more flexible, because by the end, they were having them come back 5 days a week. So just something to think about there. And then what we also are seeing in terms of increase here, the gig economy is growing significantly. There are more workers over the age of 55 than under the age of 30. The gig economy really simply being this technology that connects an independent contractor to that end user with a service. The reason why those over the age of 55 suggest that they are interested in pursuing work in the gig economy is simple. They like the fact that they have flexibility and control over their time. This is an important theme you're going to continue to hear when we think about benefits, because this is that trade-off they're willing to make. These apps allow them to turn off the app when they don't want to work and turn it on when they do. But flexibility, very important to folks at this stage. Also, just a dynamic that's changing within the workplace and for us to be thinking about is the fact that there can be as many as 4 generations all working in tandem together, and communication styles are different amongst those demographics, and maybe really a little bit of empathy and understanding about how people work and get things done can be helpful. So I just have a little bit of fun with this sometimes when I ask people if we were all together, what does this mean to you when you hear your boss say, we need to get this project done? Well, what MIT had concluded was, depending on your generation demographic, the response might be different. Older boomers say, dropping everything, this is an immediate need of attention, I'm right on it. Younger boomers say, you know what, it's important, I'm definitely going to do it, but I'll get to it when I can. Generation X thinking a little bit more like, I appreciate you bringing that to my attention. We'll see if we can fit it in. Whereas what I've noticed a lot in my workplace is the younger folks saying, well, perfect, let's all get into a workspace together and collaborate on this issue. But I do think this is important just to mention, because there are dynamics where we will be bringing older people into the workplace that might be reporting to a younger generation. There can be frustration if there isn't any understanding around communication. So this is where I'll kind of just put out a quick advertisement for something that Hartford Funds has. We have a piece called Communicate to Connect, which is it's a great tool for those in HR. It is just a manual for ways to really styles for connecting with different generations and how they are responsive. So it's also an exercise that can be done in a group as well. So,
and Tom,
I'll be sure to
actually,
get that to Chris.
Yep,
Yeah.
our next month's program, we've got back to back with the Hartford, is how to value inclusive language. So it's like thematically, communication and I no joke, and not to digress, I had a conversation with someone who works for me in the office this morning. And ultimately, I'm like, it's not the situation, it's the communication, right? Like that, at the end of the day, that's always either what's making a situation or breaking a situation.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, and I'm guessing you have Ryan Sullivan as a side note, who wrote the book on communication. So it's going to be a great guest for you all. And then, just finally, before we move into that new social contract, I do think this is important. Kristen already touched on the fact we're probably sick of hearing the word wellness. But while financial wellness is very important, I will share with you. MIT did a study on what concerns people most about retirement by age, and there is a distinct shift. So from age 24 to 64, our primary concern when we're faced with retirement is finances. People sometimes ask me why we don't care before the age of 24. It's because we don't have any money, but eventually we do, and we care. But that shifts at the age of 65. Now our primary concern is health and wellness. Number 2 is finance. And then it becomes more pronounced after that. So at age 75, our primary concern in retirement is health and wellness. Number two is loss of cognitive function. And number three is a distance third is finance. It kind of leads us down to this bit of foundational research that MIT had created. They call it the three questions. They say anyone over the age of 45 should be asking either themselves or a loved one these questions that can be predictive of a future quality in life in retirement. And I think these questions actually can be helpful for all of you because when you're talking to somebody about maybe that transition, it can be an awkward conversation to have. I know it is when you're talking to your loved ones. This is kind of a nice icebreaker. You just say, hey, listen, I heard something from MIT. It was pretty interesting. Let me share it. The first question is, who will change my light bulbs? Which is all about age and in place. Where am I going to live? What are the services, modifications I might need to do it? How am I going to get an ice cream cone? What kind of access, transportation needs? Will I need to get to the doctor, the dentist, these type of things, caregiving? Who will I have lunch with? What is my social network look like, which is so critically important. And all of us as professionals can provide interesting resources to help people to solve those questions. And that's where it leads me into the new social contract. Because, when it comes to compensation packages today and employee expectations, at the end of the day, I think we can all agree that one size does not necessarily fit all anymore. In fact, we can see here from respondents that were suggesting that majority have said that an employee's ability to give them customized benefit packages was either going to be a must or nice to have option. And then 72% saying it would actually increase their loyalty to their current employer. And Kristen, you had already touched on this a little bit, perhaps we have that individual that is a caregiver and they might have a unique set of circumstances and needs and benefits that might be more important to tailor to them. Or maybe you have that, young person that just graduated from college and they're 22 years old. And at this point, 401k contribution really isn't as important or as pressing as maybe paying down that student loan debt, right? So maybe there's some type of compensation package where we're deferring the benefit that would otherwise go to 401k into some type of student loan pay down. Other thing to think about with young people is that, like myself, I stuck onto my parents' health plan as long as physically possible. So, maybe diverting some of that money that would be otherwise marked for health, if somebody is already on a family member's plan, maybe go into that other type of benefit need. A seasoned worker, might be more interested in something like PTO. Like I mentioned, that flexibility of time, maybe having some type of offer where they're able to buy PTO time and instead of maybe divert some of those type of benefit contributions. But beyond that, it really can just be providing resources that can help to educate and connect people to things that can help them around areas of challenge. Right now, we're seeing a lot in the workplace coming up around mental health issues and well-being, and there's certainly a lot of resources that can be provided around that can be considered benefit compensation. And Kristen, I might have you touch on this a bit as well, because I know at Raymond James, you all have some of the most robust resources when it comes to, connecting people to particular longevity services that might even count as some type of benefit to folks. So is there anything that, like when we're talking about serving as a solution hub specifically, I look at some of these different areas and I just can't help but think about the Raymond James longevity resources.
Yep.
Is that anything you work with?
No, absolutely. So it's bringing to bear, like for instance, once you get to the age at which you have to make decisions on Medicare. I mean, that's complicated. I have two colleagues who reached the age of 65 and they're financial advisors, and they reached out to a Medicare specialist within our network that our clients have access to to talk through as someone who's still working at the age of 65. Do I have to take Medicare? Should I take Medicare? And the challenge is that these conversations are very nuanced. I was going to share towards the end of the presentation, but I think it's appropriate now. This morning, I had a conversation with a client. They've been a client for 20 years. We've done umpteenth participant education programs, and the focus is always on save, 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 accumulation, accumulation. Okay, well, guess what? The employees who sat through my session 20 years ago are 20 years older, and it's no longer the accumulation, but they brought in a different workforce. So the education that we're structuring for them is based on life stage. So we are building a pre-retirement workshop where I'd say 5 or 10 years ago would be all about the dollars and cents. How much do I need to live in retirement? Where am I getting my income? The portfolio? Am I buying an annuity? But that's all, those are the tools. That's not the plan. The plan are the questions Tom's bringing to bear. And increasingly, you know this, your employees are asking more from you, right? They're looking to their employer as a resource for things that they need in their life. And as you get to that 10 years prior to retirement, it's really important to have some very significant, whether it's conversations with the spouse or even just some self-reflection about what does that look like. And then you can plan from there. And then you could build the portfolio and the income stream. So we're doing that pre-retirement workshop. And then on the other end, you've got, you know, the principles of investing. Last week was America Saves Week. We did a program for the participants of our clients where you're talking about, well, what is savings? Savings is simply delayed consumption. And why are you delaying consumption? You're delaying consumption because dollars in the future have an opportunity to compound and they're worth more to you. NerdWallet actually has a great commercial where it's you're talking to your future self. And they have an individual and then a picture of this individual having aged 30 years later, and they're having an argument, being like, what did you do to me? Like, this wasn't the plan. So a lot of that is, and I can understand you're thinking about these things and saying, how can I, like, I can't be everything. Listen, we know HR professionals are superheroes, right? Like you're a psychologist, you're brought in for all sorts of situations. I do believe that this is doable because it's in the packaging and the delivery of the benefits. And I don't want to take up too much time, but it's just so relevant. Yesterday, I was on a call with a group of people. My colleague Kevin Mahoney is leading a panel at SHRM 24 in Chicago. Hopefully we'll see you there. If you are, look out for the longevity panel. I'll give that a plug. And we have 3 experts. One is someone who's been in the retirement industry forever and is now a researcher on longevity, someone in the healthcare field, and then total benefits, and talking about longevity as a challenge and an opportunity. On the one hand, what Tom's talking about is, okay, well, what does this mean towards being able to avoid that proverbial brain drain? On the other side, old employees are expensive to retain, right? Because we have more healthcare costs and all of that goes into it. So at the end of the day, you want workers who show up to work because they want to be there and you want them to be there.
Yeah, that's perfect. And, you know, just in terms of the Service Solution Hub, I'll take it out of the world of concept for a moment in terms of connecting you to some actual resources around this, and Kristen had sent an email that included a workbook from MIT called 5 Ways Technology Will Change the Way You Age, where they'd put together 5 categories of areas of importance for somebody that might be getting towards more senior, and then what are the apps, the technologies, the services, the companies that you can plug in to help. I'll give you a for instance. I'm seeing on the screen here, caregiver resources. There is a program called Honor, HONOR, which is kind of like that Uber technology backbone. It connects you to a certified caregiver, turn it on demand if you need help getting dressed, getting fed, getting out of bed. You know, there's a company called Washio, which will do dry clean, picks it up, takes it right back to your doorstep. You know, not all of these things actually have to incur a cost to the employer. Really just providing the resource and being able to connect to somebody, the idea it can be really important, and that can oftentimes be free. And so I encourage you to, just reach out to local agencies on counseling, seeing what they offer, and get a Rolodex of individuals that you can refer your employees to. And maybe those providers might be able to offer some type of discount if you're giving some referral of business to them. Um, but even if it's not offering discounts, I just think finding all sorts of solutions to the challenges that we will be facing, like you mentioned, Kristen, would as we think about that transition to retirement, it can be very beneficial. Yeah, I'm just going to mention one thing on gym membership and wellness coaching for all of us. Uh, our friend Dr. Mark Milstein, the neuroscientist, tells us if we can find just an excuse to walk 30 minutes every day, you don't have to be a marathon runner, just 5-minute segments of walking, you will have a reduced risk of dementia and Alzheimer's by 35%. I know I'm going to keep on hitting you with this, but uh, other reasons why we want to encourage that healthy behavior, or maybe connect somebody to a resource that can be beneficial to them, keeps them engaged in the workplace longer as well. And then, just in terms of thinking differently here about flex time and flexible work, I think this is interesting because you're seeing on the screen here, not many employers have given thought to what we might consider as some type of more flexible work plan. We're seeing something like, I think we know what remote working and part-time work is, but job sharing is an interesting example of maybe you take one job and have it done by 2 or 3 different individuals. Say somebody comes in on Monday through Wednesday, and then that next person is covering just Thursday and Friday. And that is one opportunity to provide some type of flexible transitioned work. Or thinking about phased retirement, I think is an interesting concept. You're seeing that not many employers have really thought about this concept, but it's really, I think, a pretty promising compromise between the employer and the employee, because you might allow the employees to work a shorter workday, reduce the number of days they're working, kind of give them that gradual ease into retirement, allow them to get that experience of what that additional time will be like. Of course, there will be that trade-off in something like a phased retirement where they will be accepting less salary as a result. But it can really be helpful for them to get a picture of what that future will look like. Also, during this time, providing some type of opportunity for that individual to offer mentor support to somebody that might be really even considered as an apprentice to them can be very valuable. And that's why I'll just go back to thinking about putting in this, not only this process for understanding what our more seasoned employees do, but maybe setting out some type of formal process for how they're sharing that information with others. As you're seeing on the screen here, a majority of people are interested and willing to not only work with multiple generations, but they're willing to share their experience with others. So just as a couple of examples here, one thing that Hartford Funds does is we call it peer mentoring, where it's actually not reverse mentoring or senior leadership to a younger employee. It's really just connecting with somebody in a department you do not work in or are unfamiliar with. The idea is just to get exposed to what other people do within the office, and it creates better collaboration and synergy between the departments. But if you think about reverse mentoring, there's a lot of young people with a lot of interesting technical know-how that we find that older workers are very interested and can positively be impacted by. And then, of course, the senior employees coaching, we know the impact of that. And then, other things, just in terms of providing some type of additional resource to folks, this one's interesting. MIT tells us that if we aren't re-educating ourselves in some significant form or fashion once every 11 years, we run the risk of that information becoming obsolete. And, particularly if you have somebody that received a degree 20, 30 years ago, there is certainly opportunity for more learning, or you might have brought somebody in that came from a completely different industry. And now we can be offering resources to educational connections, oftentimes for free. Coursera and edX are some of the popular examples. Details on and descriptions on these massive multiple online courses are going to be available in the 5 Ways Technology workbook that was provided for you. So just for the sake of time, I won't jump too much more into that. But just kind of as we wind it down here, Chris, just thinking about the different ways, because retirement planning, it's not incorrect to think about it. It just might be incomplete because, as we discussed not too long ago, the word retirement is probably going to be retired itself at some point.
Well
The
said.
question won't actually be when will I retire, but it probably will be what's next for me. When we think about the 8,000 days in that exploring phase, there's a number of different things we will do. And so just having us be able to provide some type of support and help in terms of transition planning can be very powerful. And so just with that, as some follow-up for you, if you're interested in further reading, we did make sure to send out the workbook, I believe, Kristen, for not only this, but the
We'll send it
technology
out
piece.
after this program. Yep.
Okay, very good. And then any additional research on longevity planning from MIT can be found at hartfordfunds.com. It's just, you don't have to register for our site or pay for anything. Just go up to Investor Insights and see MIT for more information. But I'll close it here with this quote from Dr. Joe. By having the insights, it's not just going to be a better place to work that fosters well-being and community. It'll be a more productive workplace and therefore a more profitable workplace. And so, Chris, I'll just have you kind of summarize some of your thoughts on this and what's next for folks.
Yeah, thanks so much, Tom. We could spend a day on this topic, really. I mean, there's so many examples. There's so many, I'm sure a discussion on this topic would have been very productive. This format is a webinar. And if there are topics that you would like to explore more fully, I am going to share a link to my contact and my calendar if you would like to follow up with a conversation about how we could take this, how you could take this and practically apply it within your organization. Now, of course, it's very nuanced. I think step one is understanding where are you, and so it's on you understanding where you are, but then educating the fellow decision makers within your organization about who are your employees and who are your employees going to be 10 years from now, and making sure that you have the benefits offering. But again, back to that communication word, it's not just what are your benefits, it's how are they getting positioned with your employees. That is going to be so very important. This sounds very expensive. It's not, it's in the packaging. And it's just, I think, I'll wrap it up by bringing back to what Tom said to kick off the remarks, was back to that Agnes, right? What was the E in Agnes? It was empathy. And having that mindset when you are speaking to your employees and trying to get your peers, I know HR is better at this than maybe your other functional units within your organization, but to have that same approach. So with that, I know we're at the top of the hour. There have been some questions that have come in that were very interesting. One thing, Tom, if you could touch on, and then we'll wrap up and get out of here. How about there was a question that came up at the slide that had the truck, the nurses, and and then the following, which says there's over one job opening for everyone who's looking for a job. Well, why is matchmaking not happening? Like, what do we need to do to match skills with the unemployed?
Yeah, I think,
And we don't have another hour.
no, I know. I think it just as it stands right now, it's just that there are the employee searching for a job is a lot more discerning. They are better educated than ever before. They want, particularly young people, want that work-life balance, and so we as providers need to be able to offer it if you want to be able to stay competitive and recruit the top talent, right? It's as simple as that. And I think what you mentioned is true. It doesn't have to be expensive. The one thing I'll say, and then we'll go, is this: when you take this back to a leadership group, I like to position it just by saying there were some interesting insights from MIT, but this is what Dr. Joe will tell you. If the ultimate answer is no, we at least gave those decision makers the critical time to think through and understand and be educated on what could be important to them. And if they said no, they were still given that opportunity, and that's a good thing. I don't know if you'd agree with that.
For sure. I mean,
Yeah,
half the battle is just bringing the conversation to the table.
right.
We all live in our own world, in our own silos, and it's educating the rest of your organization about kind of widening their eyes about what exists.
Yeah. So I think just
So
telling people that there's a desire for it. It's not expensive, like you mentioned. It's just how we frame it and package it, and everyone will be. It's a win-win.
for sure. So we are at the top of the hour. We used every second of our 60 minutes, and we thank you for being generous with your time today and for listening. You can expect some follow-up emails, and certainly feel free to reach out with any questions or interest in further discussion. And Tom, many thanks to you for your insights that you shared today. It was a great program.
Thanks for having me.
Take care.